Hey, y'all, and welcome to Shade in the City. It's your girl Treese here, and we are here to get into season one, episode 101. This was today's Wednesday's episode of Beyond the Gates. So, for all of my Beyond the Gates Shade squad, if you haven't already, and my new viewers, y'all go ahead, hit that like button for me, please. And if you have not already, please, if you're liking the vibe, go ahead and subscribe and help us hit our goal, our 2K goal, before the end of before next week. Okay. But yeah, y'all, I appreciate y'all being here. And let's jump right into it because this episode definitely felt more like an 100 than the last one. Okay. But let's get into it, y'all. And let's get shady. All right, y'all. So we kick off this episode. We see Vernita down at the country club, and Vernon is realizing that she's nervous about the upcoming Articulates performance that's supposed to be happening that night, and so she's just nervous and concerned about embarrassing the family, and so they're apparently waiting around because Jim Price asked if he could talk to them alone, and so then we basically get a cute moment of Vernon telling Anita how great she is and how he knows that she's nervous because of certain things that she does, but basically reassures her that she's going to get up on stage and, knock it out the park. Right. And so basically she, of course, thanks him for easing her mind. Now let's move over to Chelsea, who has walked into the Grand's house looking for Anita when she finds Tracy and Ethel. Okay. They're in the living room rehearsing their choreography. And so they're flattered when, Chelsea recognizes them. And of course, Chelsea, she's like, oh, I want to record you, for content. And so then we see the seamstress show up, okay, with the outfits. And they asked Chelsea, they asking Chelsea for her opinion because she's supposed to be Miss Fashionista. And so, she respectfully tells the ladies that their outfits are classy and retro. Okay. But Tracy and Ethel are like, oh, so you trying to call us old. And so Chelsea said, no, I just, I think that you guys should wear something spicy and electric. And I said, Chelsea, if what came across is what about to come across our screen, your fault. I blame you, spicy and electric. They're like asking Chelsea for her ideas to make, basically make them hip. And because she's a certified fashion genius. And so of course, Chelsea, she's like, I don't have much time to make y'all look to even tackier, but I'm gonna do it. And so literally my notes say, we should have known that Chelsea was behind these bad outfits. Shout out to Elaine, who still thinks that purse was ugly. Okay. And then we see Tracy and Sharon and they're singing her praises afterwards that she's made whatever little adjustments, but then they're like, oh, we didn't get Anita's opinion on it. Not that y'all really cared to anyway. Now, Naomi has gone to see her mother, Danny, and she's, Danny's over here trying to figure out an outfit for the evening. So she starts going on about Anita finding her fire and thinks that, maybe that's what she needs. And, Danny's going a mile a minute. So then Danny tells Naomi, and matter of fact, you should find something better than what you got on. And I said, damn, Danny. And so Naomi tells her, look, basically she's struggling because she's keeping the secret about Martin from Jacob. And so obviously Danny realizes that Naomi is aware of what's going on. And so she said, look, Naomi tells her, I understand why Vernon and Martin did what they did to cover it up. I just can't get over the fact that my daddy, Bill, is an accessory to, unaliving somebody. And Danny said, hold on, Bill did what? So then Naomi is telling her mother everything that she knows. And so Danny is still trying to process what she just heard. So she's upset that the family didn't tell her the whole story either. And she was like, well, I wonder why they trusted you over me. So she's like, no offense. And so Naomi was like, because, Deputy Do Good He's suspicious. And so basically, they want to have a heads up when he starts getting closer to the truth. And so Danny said, okay, well, that makes sense. And so Danny's like, damn, that's why Bill been acting all odd and whatever lately. And so Naomi tells her, I haven't talked to Bill nor Jacob about what's going on. Danny advises her that, you're not allowed to have a marriage basically full of secret, because you and Jacob are the last couple standing. And we need you to be example for this younger generation, because ain't nobody else is at this point. And I was like, well, don't be counting on that, because Deputy Dogood gonna do good until he's divorced. Okay. Now we see Nicole. She's met up with Martin for like their first unofficial session. Martin isn't really sure where to start. And so Nicole tells him, well, start like if he's telling her a story, and is like, where are you at right now? And she's like, I promise not to judge you, only guide you. So Martin opens up and, lets her know that basically his top priority right now is saving his marriage and keeping his family together. He's hopeful that, Nicole can basically put him on the fast track to make that happen. And he said, I thought I used to have all the answers, and now I don't know what to do, because I've been letting everybody else call the shots for, shots running my life. Nicole asked him what it was like for him being a powerful congressman, and then, having two men basically try to take that power and his life on a dark country road. And so Martin, reminds her that, well, I took a life as well that night. And so Nicole said, yeah, but it also robbed you of telling your story and unburdening your soul. And so Martin admits that, yeah, I was angry and terrified that night. Nicole says, well, you were powerless to tell the people who could have loved you through this. Okay. Obviously referring to her and Smitty. So Martin says, well, Granddad told me to stay quiet. And I know it was for the best. I know he was just trying to protect me. And Nicole said, was it really? Was it really? And I said, ooh. So Martin said, look, I know Granddad had my best interests at heart. And Nicole said, yeah, I don't doubt that. Sometimes when humans love, they do the most damaging things without meaning to. And I said, ooh, okay. And Martin says, look, I was just trying to save Granddad because he was trying to save me. So Martin says that he thought he was protecting Smitty. And, he thought he was good once he came out and told the truth, because Smitty thought he was innocent. But he also remembered the look on Smitty's face when he found out what kind of man he is. Okay. Nicole says that you were forced into that life death situation. Okay. And so Martin said, but that doesn't matter in Smitty's eyes. And that, he kicked me out because of the years of lies. And I said, well, Nicole, you should be able to relate to that, sis. So Martin is like, so what am I supposed to do when the man that I love doesn't want me in his life? And all he wants to do, and all I want to do, is be with him and be home. And so he's like, Mom, please help me fix this. And so Nicole tells him, look, just take baby steps, start off baby steps, don't force it. And she's like, are you still having nightmares? And so he says that he is, but he's having different ones. And, basically the result's the same. He's still not really getting any sleep. And so Nicole talks about how not getting proper rest affects, so many other things in your life. And so she wants to get a handle on it. And so Martin says that, oh, I ain't trying to be on nobody's prescriptions. And so she said, don't worry about that. We're going to start off with some breathing exercises. And then here comes Danny, who walks in and loudly interrupts, telling them that she's there to get them ready for the party. Okay. Now we move over to Samantha, Cecile, Ponytail, whatever you want to call her, right? She's at Chelsea and Kat's work studio. I'm gonna call it the boom boom room. All right. Because it seems like a lot more boom boom goes down than work in the studio. Okay. So Kat is talking about, marketing strategies that Samantha can do to help them promote Chelsea Cat. Y'all know I love saying Chelsea Cat. So Kat notices that Samantha is not really following. And so she's like, well, what's going on? And so Samantha responds that, I thought I had got better at pretending, like pretending like everything's okay, like you do. Kat is confused, and Samantha says, well, take a seat. And literally my notes say, not on the couch, please. Not on the couch. Not on the couch. And so Samantha breaks the news that Smitty and Martin have broken up, and apparently no one told Kat. And so Samantha, just shrugs it off to, oh, you just been busy with Chelsea, Kat, and Tomas. And so Kat thinks back to how she ran into Martin at Offrey Jeans and was going on and on about Tomas and didn't even give him a chance to talk. And so Kat's like, I'm so sorry what's going on with your parents. And she's like, I can relate after watching my parents' marriage implode. And so Samantha questions how basically how can Smitty think splitting up would solve anything. And she's asking Kat for advice as to what she can do to help her parents. And at this point, they're both sitting on this nasty couch that I don't think anybody's put any resolve or any type of anything into any type of, cleaning supplies. Let's move on. So Smitty is basically giving Tyrell instructions for the night and tells him that he plans to drop him off. And so Tyrell is like, well, why are you not coming to the performance? And so Smitty's like, I'm so busy. I got work to do. And Tyrell said, no, I think that you're making excuses. And he's like, Dad, it was one fight. And so he's like, how would grandma feel, great grandma feel, that if you weren't there? And Smitty's like, nah, she gonna understand. And Tyrell said, no, make that make sense for me. You're always the one talking about we need to be there for family, and now you just bowing out. Nah, that don't make sense. So now we see Naomi show up down at the Boom Boom Room to see Chelsea when she finds out that, finds Kat and Samantha there. And so Naomi is asking how Samantha's doing because obviously she knows what's going on. And so Samantha talks about how she's devastated by all the breakups going on in the family. And she thinks the Duprees should just stop falling in love. And Kat kind of agrees with this. And I said, well, Kat, you had some bad peen, girl. You just, some bad eggplant will do that to you. But Kat mentions how, Naomi and Jacob have found the secret sauce in their marriage. And Naomi tells them, no, we haven't, girl. If you want that advice, you need to go to the Grands. And so then she quickly changes the subject to the Articulate's performance that's happening that night, right? Then we move over to Anita's, where literally my notes say I totally tuned out this conversation between Chelsea, Tracy, and Ethel. All right. So she gives them a box with their logo on it. Chelsea Cat. Okay, and basically she gives them a box with the logo on it so she can use it as they're filming content. And she starts to interview the ladies, and they've, been talking about what they did since the group ended, and how they've remained, and how her and Tracy, Ethel and Tracy have remained close. And then Chelsea asked about the relationship with Anita and how, they managed to stay close. And then, they take a little break. We see Jim Price show up, and he's meeting Vernita at the country club. And so Anita's like, well, look, why did you need to speak with me before the concert? So Jim is telling her that, look, we want you to do like a jazz solo. And Anita is like, hell to the nod. Nope, I'm not going to do that because these girls are already waiting for me to low key betray them. So I'm not doing that. And she said the spotlight belongs to all of us tonight. And Vernon just sitting there smiling, happy as a pappy, and so Anita comes home, and she finds Chelsea sitting there talking to Tracy and Ethel. And so they tell Chelsea that, Anita is like her sister, and they went off, and, the one that went off and got married well and then moved out of town. And so they go on about, how they're like family, even if they drifted apart. And so Chelsea is asking them, well, why don't y'all bust something for me? Bust some notes, you know what I mean? And so then they give us this little shooby, dooby, shooby. That's what they gave us. Okay. And of course Anita comes in and gives them a round of applause. And I said, not for the shooby, dooby. Not that. Oh, okay. Is that all they gonna give us during the performance? Okay. And so Chelsea decides, basically it's time for her to run off. And so, they tell Anita about the outfits, and so surprisingly, Anita thinks that they look great and that Chelsea did a great job. And I said, I'm gonna assume that, because of age, y'all might be going colorblind. Things happen as you get older. I understand. I'm not there yet, but I understand that it happens. No shade. So back at Nicole's house, Nicole and Mr. Danny, they look, I forgot about Mama's concert. So basically Danny's like, you know what? It's fine because y'all need to get out, have fun, and laugh. And so Martin said, that's a little hard for me to do right now. And so Danny tells him, well, look, figure it out, compartmentalize. That's what CEOs and, serial unalivers do, okay? They do it all the time. And so she hands them both outfits to wear to the show. And Martin says, look, I just can't do it, Aunt Danny. And so Danny said, look, you're going to the concert. And so Martin says, well, when you interrupted us, me and Mom were kind of discussing things. And so Danny's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Nicole says, look, neither me nor Martin are in the mood to go out tonight, okay? And so Danny questions, what is your mama gonna say? Nicole said, really, her feelings are not on my top 10 list of things to worry about. I said, ooh, you getting big for your britches, Nicole. And basically she said, look, she's just gonna have to understand, especially after the way her and Daddy kept this secret about Vernon from me. I said, oh, well, when you have points. He said a little civil disobedience won't hurt him. And so Danny said, you know what? This is delayed petulance. And this is what happens when you don't act out as a teenager. Now you deciding to do it when you're grown. You're going to have to deal with that look from mama. And Nicole tells her, oh, I'll survive. I'll survive her looks. And Danny said, well, you won't be able to survive her loving on you and hugging you, her hiding how hurt she is, and questions, do you want to suffer through that for the rest of your life? And so Nicole tells Danny, look, what you're doing is unforgivable. Okay. And so Danny hands her wardrobe. Okay. And then she starts to work on convincing Martin. And so Martin feels like, well, if I go, I'm just going to bring everybody down. And Danny said, no, you owe it to your grandmother, especially since she's letting you live under her roof rent free. And I said, Danny, when you need to make a point, girl, I'm just saying. And so Nicole admits, you know what, Martin, although I understand how you feel, I do remember Anita singing to you as a baby. I do remember anytime you asked her to sing at a fundraiser, she did it. And so basically Danny urges Martin, like, look, just take one night off to relax. And so of course, Martin gonna show up for his grandma. But back at the Richardson household, Tyrell is trying on shirt or, going through shirt selections, and still trying to convince Smitty that he should come. He reminds him how much, Anita adores him. And Smitty says, look, I'll send her flowers backstage. Tyrell said, that's not gonna make up for the fact of you missing her big comeback. That's gonna make history. Come on now. And so Smitty said, look, why are you giving me a hard time, Tyrell? And Tyrell said, cuz I don't want to hang out with Daddy. I'm still mad at him too. So he said, look, I can't let it go because it's the Grants. And he said, you done always told us that, we got to be there for family. And you can't not be there just so you can avoid Martin. And he said, and if that's what you're doing, then maybe I'm looking up to the wrong person. And I said, good way to guilt trip him. Good job, Tyrell. And so Smitty said, look, I don't think Anita's show is the best place for me and Martin to try and talk about anything. And Tyrell said, no, I disagree. It's probably the best place. That's why people go to the movies on first dates. And so Smitty was like, I just don't, everybody's going to hate me for kicking Martin out. I'm not going. And Tyrell tells him, it's your call, your consequences. I said, ooh, go ahead, Tyrell. So then Chelsea has finally made it back to the boom boom room, okay? Where, of course, Naomi, Kat, and Samantha are there. So she's telling him about the content that she made with Tracy and Sharon. And so Naomi commends Chelsea on the shoo-doo, do, and Kat and Samantha aren't as excited. They don't get the big deal behind the shooby dooby doo. They don't understand. So Chelsea's like, well, what the hell is wrong with y'all? And they're like, it's family drama. So Chelsea said, well, I ain't trying to hear it. And she plops down, literally, my notes say, on a nasty couch that at this point they're all sitting on. And literally my notes say, this episode of Beyond the Gates has been sponsored by the Big Comfy Unclean Couch. Okay. This is when we need some product placement. All right. So she plays Tracy and Ethel's do shoo. And they talk about how that could go viral. And I said, so y'all tell me if I get on TikTok and give y'all a little shoo do, I'm gonna go viral tomorrow. Is that what y'all telling me? Okay. So all the girls are sitting watching old videos of their articulates, and Samantha talks about their moves, and apparently she plans to replicate them. And I said, okay. Okay, girl. And so we see Vernon go by to see Smitty and Tyrell. I thought this was very big of Vernon. He goes and says, look, I know we're overdue for a conversation and I know you have questions. And so Smitty said, I do. And says, but tonight is about Anita. And so Vernon said, look, I just basically came to stress how important this night is to her, and everything that she's done for our family. Clearly that's where Martin gets it from. And so Smitty says, yeah, Martin will do anything for you too, evidently. And I said, ooh. So Vernon says, look, I hope you can put your animosity towards me aside and be there to support the family. And so Tyrell is like, yeah, that's what I've been telling him, granddad. Vernon tells him, look, it's a personal invitation from Anita and you don't want to disappoint her. And so I hope that we see you cheering in the front row. And so then back at the Dupree house, Anita thanks, Tracy and Ethel for basically giving her the opportunity to make things right. They're all excited about hitting the stage again, and they discuss how they need to honor Barbara during the show. They, basically go back down memory lane about how it's all Dante's fault. But they finally admit that it also wasn't Anita's fault and they all played a part. And I said, well, that's good. And then they hug it out and vow to make Barbara proud. And then Anita tells them about Jim Price coming to her about doing the solo and tells them that she already said no, but basically wants to vote unanimously as they used to do and agree to all say no together. So, and that was episode 101 of Beyond the Gates, guys. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you have not already, please make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you comment. Make sure you subscribe. And make sure you hit the notification bell. Make sure you're following us on all the platforms. It's TikTok, IG, Facebook, Blue Sky. I'm losing TikTok, IG, Facebook, Blue Sky, and the X. Almost forgot the X, y'all. And yeah, I will catch y'all tomorrow for episode 102. Y'all have a good night. Be blessed. Bye-bye.